Aita for confronting my sister about her behavior at my wedding? Hello Reddit, I'm here because I need advice on a deeply personal and painful situation involving my sister, Sarah, 31F, and my recent wedding. I, 28F, am feeling completely torn, and I'm unsure if I was right to confront her. I need your help to figure out if I'm justified in my feelings or if I've overreacted. To give you some context, Sarah and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, we were as different as two people could be. I was the quiet, bookish type, more interested in reading and spending time alone, while Sarah was the life of the party. She was the one who always had a crowd of friends around her, excelling in social situations and basking in the attention she received. Our parents often compared us, whether they meant to or not, and this only served to deepen the divide between us. They'd say things like, "Why can't you be more outgoing like Sarah?" Or "Sarah, why can't you focus more on your studies like your sister?" These constant comparisons sowed the seeds of resentment early on. As children, our relationship was a mixture of rivalry and affection. We had moments of closeness, like when we would stay up late talking about our dreams and fears. But those moments became fewer and farther between as we grew older. By the time we reached adolescence, our relationship had become strained, almost competitive. It felt like we were constantly vying for our parents' approval, and more often than not, Sarah seemed to come out on top. The tension between us only worsened in high school. While I excelled academically, Sarah was the social butterfly, popular and adored by everyone. She was the captain of the cheerleading squad, homecoming queen, and the girl every boy wanted to date. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, studious one, often overlooked or dismissed as the smart one but never the fun one. Our parents' approval became a currency, and I often felt like I was coming up short. By the time we reached adulthood, our relationship was more strained than ever. We weren't exactly enemies, but we weren't close either. We'd see each other at family gatherings and exchange polite conversation, but there was always an undercurrent of tension between us. It was like we were just waiting for the next thing to set us off. When I met my fiancé, I felt like I was finally moving into a new chapter of my life. Planning our wedding was a joyous experience, and I wanted to share that happiness with my family. Despite our rocky history, I decided to invite Sarah, hoping that this could be an opportunity for us to reconnect. After all, a wedding is supposed to be a time for family to come together, and I wanted her to be there for me on this special day. Our wedding was small, just close family and friends, held at a beautiful garden venue that my fiancé and I had fallen in love with the moment we saw it. Everything was perfect. The weather, the setting, the people. But when Sarah arrived, I immediately sensed that something was off. For starters, she was late, which was unlike her. Sarah was always punctual, sometimes annoyingly so. But that day, she walked in just as the ceremony was about to begin, slipping into her seat without making eye contact with me. I noticed, but I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it didn't matter. During the ceremony, I couldn't help but notice how distant she seemed. While everyone else was focused on us, she appeared to be somewhere else entirely, her mind clearly preoccupied. I told myself not to worry about it and tried to stay in the moment, but her behavior gnawed at me. The reception only made things worse. Sarah barely spoke to anyone, choosing instead to sit alone, staring at her phone or out into the distance. I tried several times to engage her in conversation, to bring her into the celebration, but each attempt was met with short, dismissive replies. She was polite but cold, like she was putting up a wall between us. It was hard not to take it personally, especially when I saw her interact with others in the past. This wasn't the Sarah I knew. As the evening wore on, my concern grew into frustration. Here I was, on one of the most important days of my life, and my own sister couldn't be bothered to show even a shred of enthusiasm. I watched as she avoided the dance floor, didn't participate in the toasts, and left early without saying goodbye. It was like she was a ghost at her own sister's wedding. I tried to keep my focus on the joy of the day, but her behavior cast a shadow over the entire event. I had hoped for some sort of connection with her, but she seemed determined to keep her distance. Still, I didn't want to make a scene at my own wedding, so I let it slide, convincing myself that maybe she was just having an off day. A couple of weeks later, I received a call from a mutual friend who casually mentioned seeing Sarah out with Mark, 30M, my ex-boyfriend. My heart dropped. Mark and I had been together throughout college, and our breakup had been one of the most painful experiences of my life. We had been serious, talking about a future together, until it all fell apart. Seeing his name pop up in conversation was like reopening an old wound. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed they had just run into each other somewhere, but as the conversation continued, it became clear that they were more than just acquaintances. The friend mentioned seeing them together multiple times over the past few months. Suddenly, Sarah's odd behavior at the wedding made sense. The lateness, the distance, the coldness. It all pointed to something I had never imagined. Sarah and Mark were involved. I felt a wave of emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion. Why hadn't she told me? Why had she kept it a secret? The thought of my sister being involved with someone who had hurt me so deeply was unbearable. I couldn't understand how she could do something like that, especially without even giving me a heads up. For days I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, while another part of me feared what I might hear. I was already hurt. I wasn't sure I could handle more. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to talk to her. I couldn't just ignore this. When I finally decided to confront Sarah, I was determined to stay calm. I wanted to approach the situation with an open mind, to give her a chance to explain herself. I asked her to meet me for coffee, and she agreed. I could tell she was apprehensive, probably sensing that something was up. As soon as we sat down, I came out with it. I told her what I had heard and asked her point blank if it was true. Was she seeing Mark? And if so, why hadn't she told me? Sarah's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of being apologetic or even understanding, she immediately became defensive. She accused me of trying to control her life, of being unreasonable. She downplayed her relationship with Mark, insisting that it wasn't serious, that it was just something casual. But to me, that didn't make it any better. Casual or not, it was the secrecy that hurt the most. The conversation quickly escalated, with emotions running high on both sides. Sarah insisted that she had every right to live her life as she saw fit, and that I was overreacting. She argued that I had no claim over Mark, that our relationship had ended years ago, and that I should be happy for her if she had found someone she liked. But all I could think about was how she had kept it from me, how she had acted at the wedding, how she had chosen to lie by omission rather than being honest. By the time our conversation ended, we were both in tears, and nothing had been resolved. I walked away feeling more hurt and confused than ever. It was as if I didn't know my sister at all. The betrayal was compounded by the fact that she didn't seem to understand or care how much this hurt me. It wasn't just about Mark. It was about trust, honesty, and the bond I thought we had, fragile as it was. The fallout from our confrontation was swift and painful. Word of our argument spread through the family, and soon everyone had an opinion. My parents were divided. My mother was sympathetic to me, understanding how betrayed I felt, while my father took Sarah's side, arguing that she was entitled to her own happiness and that I was being too harsh. The division within the family left me feeling isolated and emotionally drained. It was like everything was falling apart, and I didn't know how to put it back together. As the days passed, I found myself replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. I questioned whether I had been too hard on Sarah, whether I had let my emotions get the better of me. But every time I thought about her with Mark, the pain resurfaced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been wronged. Then, out of the blue, Sarah reached out to me again, asking if we could meet. She said she had something important to tell me, something that might change how I viewed everything. I was hesitant, unsure if I was ready for more drama, but curiosity and a lingering hope that we could somehow mend things won out. When we met, Sarah looked different, tired, stressed, almost fragile. She sat down and, without much preamble, started to talk. Her voice was shaky, and it was clear that whatever she had to say was weighing heavily on her. Sarah confessed that she had been diagnosed with a serious illness several months before my wedding. It was something she had been struggling with privately, too afraid and too ashamed to tell anyone, including me. The illness had taken a toll on her mental health, making her more impulsive, more emotionally unstable. She had been grappling with feelings of fear, vulnerability, and confusion, and in the midst of all this, she had started seeing Mark. She admitted that she didn't know how to handle her diagnosis or her emotions, and that her relationship with Mark had been a way to escape, to feel something other than fear. She explained that her behavior at the wedding was because of her illness. She had been advised by her doctor to distance herself from stress and conflict, which is why she had been so distant. Her secrecy about her relationship with Mark wasn't meant to hurt me. She had been trying to cope in the only way she knew how. As she spoke, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I was angry, sad, confused, and yet I also felt a deep sense of empathy for her. Here was my sister, someone I had been so angry with, revealing a struggle I had never imagined. It was a lot to take in, and I didn't know how to process it all. In the days following our conversation, I wrestled with my feelings. On one hand, I understood the gravity of Sarah's situation and the challenges she had been facing. I felt compassion for her and wanted to support her through her illness. On the other hand, the hurt from her relationship with Mark and the secrecy still lingered. It was hard to reconcile these conflicting emotions. I found myself questioning everything. Had I been too hard on Sarah? Should I have been more understanding, given what she was going through? Or were my feelings of betrayal still valid? It was a constant internal battle, and I didn't know which side would win out. Eventually, I reached out to Sarah, telling her that I needed time to process everything. I wasn't ready to fully forgive and forget, but I also didn't want to lose my sister over this. We agreed to take things slow, to try and rebuild our relationship one step at a time. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew there would be bumps along the way, but I hoped that we could find a way to move forward. Our family remained divided, but over time, the tension began to ease. My mother encouraged us to find common ground, while my father remained somewhat distant, still unsure of how to navigate the situation. It was clear that this wasn't just about Sarah and me, it was about our entire family and the dynamics that had shaped us. So here I am, Reddit, still grappling with everything that has happened. I'm torn between the compassion I feel for Sarah's struggles and the hurt that lingers from her actions. I'm trying to be fair, to understand her side of things, but it's not easy. Every time I think I've made peace with it, something triggers those old feelings of betrayal. Was I wrong to confront her? Was I too harsh in my reaction? Or are my feelings still valid, even in light of everything I've learned? I don't know if I'll ever have a clear answer, but I'm hoping that with time, we can heal and find a way to be sisters again. Not just in name but in truth. So, Aita?